Hello, everybody. This is a recording for the backgrounds on kings, kingdoms, and the exile. So we have one more class period left after this where we will talk about the time between the Malachi and Matthew, the time between the testaments, also known as the intertestamental period. So we will do that on Monday. As for now, we will today go over the background on King Saul, King David, King Solomon, and we will touch upon the splitting of the kingdoms and the exiles. Okay, let's get started. Okay, so in 1 Samuel 8, the Israelites request a king. Let's go there. Okay, y'all. In his old age, verse 1, Samuel appointed his sons as judges over Israel. The name of his firstborn son was Joel, and the name of his second son was Abijah. They were judges in Beersheba. But his sons did not follow his ways. Instead, they made money dishonestly, accepted bribes, and perverted justice. So all the elders of Israel gathered together and approached Samuel at Ramah. They said to him, "Look, you are old, and your sons don't follow your ways. So now appoint over us a king to lead us, just like all the other nations have." But this request displeased Samuel, for they said, "Give us a king to lead us." So Samuel prayed to the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, "Do everything the people request of you. For it is not you that they have rejected, but it is me that they have rejected as their king. Just as they have done from the day that I brought them up from Egypt until this very day. They have rejected me and have served other gods. This is what they are also doing to you. So now, do as they say, but seriously warn them and make them aware of the policies of the king who will rule over them." So Samuel spoke all the words of the Lord to the people who were asking him for a king. He said, "Here are the policies of the king who will rule over you. He will conscript your sons and put them in chariot forces and in his cavalry. They will run in front of his chariot. He will appoint for himself leaders of thousands and leaders of fifties, as well as those who plow his ground and reap his harvest, and make weapons of war in his chariot equipment. He will take your daughters to be ointment makers, cooks, and bakers. He will take your best fields and vineyards and give them to his own servants. He will demand a tenth of your seed and of the produce of your vineyards, and give it to his administrators and his servants. He will take your male and female servants as well as your best cattle and your donkeys, and assign them for his own use. He will demand a tenth of your flocks, and you yourselves will be his servants. And that day you will cry out because of your king, whom you have chosen for yourselves. But the Lord won't answer you in that day." But the people refused to heed Samuel's warnings. Instead, they said, "No, there will be a king over us. We will be like all the other nations. Our king will judge us and lead us and fight our battles." So Samuel listened to everything the people said and then reported it to the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, "Do as they say and install a king over them." Then Samuel said to the men of Israel, "May each of you go back to his own city." Okay, a couple things here that are going on. I did not cover in this course the time of the judges of Israel. Judges, around chapter 17, it says there was no king in Israel in those days, and everyone did what was right in his own eyes. We did not cover that period, but Judges essentially has the cycle of disaster, repentance, faith, idolatry, moral failure, calamity or disaster, repentance, and it goes into this sort of theme, as you will. And so Judges does that. And the whole Old Testament is somewhat like that. So again, this is no different. Okay. So as first king over Israel, they get Saul. Now, I do want to point out the Israelites are not wrong to ask for a king in and of itself, because Moses indeed prophesied that there would eventually be a king over Israel. But what they wanted was a king like other nations, and they didn't really care how that looked and what that stipulated. Okay, so the tragedy of Saul. So Saul starts out promising, but Saul fears the people. He makes rash decisions, and he has selective obedience. See 1 Samuel 13, 8 through 14, and 1 Samuel 15 to kind of see Saul's character flaws come out. Let's take a look briefly at 1 Samuel 18. Okay. So by this time, by the opening of 1 Samuel 18, David has met Saul and Jonathan. They've become very close. And Jonathan is a dear, dear friend to David. And so he's assisting Saul in battles, and he's winning. And so verse 6 opens us up to say, when the men arrived after David returned from striking down the Philistine, the women from all the cities of Israel came out singing and dancing to meet King Saul. They were happy as they played their tambourines and three-stringed instrument. The women who were playing the music saying, Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. This made Saul very angry. The statement displeased him, and he thought, they have attributed to David tens of thousands, but to me they have attributed only thousands. What does he lack except the kingdom? So Saul was keeping an eye on David from that day onward. The next day, an evil spirit from God rushed upon Saul, and he prophesied within his house. Now David was playing the lyre that day. There was a spear in Saul's hand, and Saul threw the spear, thinking, I'll nail David to the wall. But David escaped from him on 2 different occasions. So Saul feared David because the Lord was with him, but he had departed from Saul. Saul removed David from his presence and made him a commanding officer. David led the army out to battle and back. Now David achieved success in all he did, for the Lord was with him. When Saul saw how successful he was afraid of him. But all Israel and Judah loved David, for he was the one leading them out to battle and back. We'll stop there. So now Saul now has devolved into throwing a spear at a defenseless David as David plays a musical instrument. Saul does not last. Saul dies by his own hand in battle. But through that, we come into the kingship of David. David has been introduced to us already as the son of Jesse.
The story of the Bible begins in a place where heaven and earth are united as one, the Garden of Eden.
And in that place, God installs his image, Adam and Eve, who will be God's royal priests and rule all creation on God's behalf. And this whole scenario is called God's blessing.
But they're led astray by a deceptive creature, and they're exiled from the heaven on earth place and lose their job as royal priests. And humanity spirals down into violence.
But God promises that a future descendant will come and defeat that deceiver by striking his head while also giving up his life, so that all the world can experience the blessing of Eden again.
This promise is passed on to Abraham and his family, from whom this royal priest will come. And this family grows and becomes a large people.
And so God invites all of Abraham's family to become a kingdom of priests. God will come and live among them in the tabernacle, and that's where Israel's priests will do their work.
But that priesthood gets off to a horrible start.
Yeah, and so when Israel eventually becomes a nation, their priesthood has become really corrupt. And so the people start asking for a king.
And eventually, God raises up David.
King David. And he's full of trust in Israel's God. In fact, with God's help, he defeats Israel's most powerful enemy.
All without proper weapons and without an army.
Now, not long after becoming king, David goes up into the high hills at the center of Israel's tribes, and he establishes a capital city, Jerusalem, otherwise known as Zion or the City of David, and it's like a new Eden.
This is the same hilltop Abraham visited. It's where he met Melchizedek, and it's where God provided a substitute sacrifice for Abraham's failures.
Exactly. And so David brings the tabernacle up into the city so he can make this the place of God's royal presence.
And during the inauguration, David's dancing with excitement.
Not only that, he deliberately dresses like Israel's high priest. And once the tabernacle arrives, he offers a sacrifice and makes this huge feast for all of the people, and he blesses them.
King David is acting like a new kind of priest.
Yes, and God approves. In fact, in the next story, God promises that from David's line will come a king who will reign forever and build the ultimate new Eden, a temple for God's presence.
David talks about this descendant to come in a poem we call Psalm 110.
Yeah, David recalls God's promise that one of his descendants will rule at God's right hand. And he goes on to say that this future king will be a priest like Melchizedek.
Yeah, Melchizedek, he's a priest king that even Abraham honored. Melchizedek's priesthood is older than Israel's priesthood.
Exactly.
But why can't David be that royal priest?
Well, David was pretty amazing sometimes, but he also failed. He slept with the wife of one of his soldiers, and then, in order to hide the whole affair, he had that man killed.
That's horrible.
It is. And his failures actually continued, leading up to this key moment where Israel's enemies were threatening to attack. And sadly, David doesn't trust God to deliver him like he did in his early days.
Right, he counts all of his soldiers. He's trusting his own power instead of trusting God.
And so God's not happy. He brings severe consequences on Israel. And David responds by surrendering to God and by offering his life as a substitute sacrifice on behalf of the people.
That's like Moses, who offered himself for the sins of the people.
And it's like Isaac, who was offered up for Abraham's sins, but then God provided a substitute.
I see, so there is a pattern here.
Right, and it's this pattern that leads us to the story of Jesus. He claimed to be the promised royal priest that the story's pointing to, the one who will bring the blessings of Eden and restore humans to their lost calling to fulfill God's promises to Abraham and David. And it's his story that we will look at next.
Okay, I do want to make one correction to the video, which is that the affair of David and Bathsheba, Uriah was not killed to hide it. And if you give me just a second, we will parse through that. So let's go now to 2 Samuel chapter 7. Okay, now David wanted to build a house for the Lord. He wanted to build the temple. But now, instead of doing that, God sends word through Nathan to David. Nathan was a prophet. I do want to point this out. Actually, let's start at 7:1 so we can see this. The king settled into his palace, for the Lord gave him relief from all his enemies on all sides. The king said to Nathan the prophet, "Look, I am living in a palace made of cedar, while the ark of God sits in the middle of a tent." Nathan replied to the king, "You should go and do whatever you have in mind, for the Lord is with you." That night the Lord told Nathan, "Go tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Do you really intend to build a house for me to live in? I have not lived in a house from the time I brought the Israelites up from Egypt to the present day. Instead, I was traveling with them and living in a tent. Wherever I moved among the Israelites, I did not say to any of the leaders whom I appointed to care for my people Israel, why have you not built me a house made of cedar? So now, say this to my servant David. This is what the Lord of hosts says. I took you from the pasture and from your work as shepherd to make you leader of my people Israel. I was with you wherever you went, and I defeated all your enemies before you. And now I will make you as famous as the great men of the earth. I will establish a place for my people in Israel and settle them there. They will live there and not be disturbed anymore. Violent men will not oppress them again, as they did in the beginning and during the time when I appointed judges to lead my people Israel. Instead, I will give you relief from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that he himself will build a dynastic house for you. When the time comes for you to die, I will raise up your descendant, one of your sons, to succeed you, and I will establish his kingdom. He will build a house for my name, and I will make his dynasty permanent. I will become his father, and he will become my son. When he sins, I will correct him with the rod of men and with the wounds inflicted by human beings. But my loyal love, my chesed, will not be removed from him as I removed it from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will stand before me permanently. Your dynasty will be permanent. Nathan told David all these words that were revealed to him. I do want to point out, Nathan initially tells David that the Lord is with him. You remember that in the Torah establishes the judicial wisdom as if a prophet makes a claim and it does not come to pass, or makes a false claim, he shall surely be put to death. David gives Nathan grace, and we'll see why that is important here shortly in the story of David and Bathsheba. Now, let's also point out, before we move on, I want to point out attention to Isaiah 11. Isaiah 11 is what we call a messianic prophecy. It is about Christ. And it starts out by saying, a shoot will grow out of Jesse's root stock, Jesse being David's father. A bud will sprout from his roots. The Lord's Spirit will rest on him, a spirit that gives extraordinary wisdom, a spirit that provides the ability to execute plans, a spirit that produces absolute loyalty to the Lord. He will take delight in obeying the Lord. He will not judge by mere appearances or make decisions on the basis of hearsay. He will treat the poor fairly. He will make righteous decisions for the downtrodden of the earth. He will strike the earth with the rod of his mouth in order the wicked to be executed. Justice will be like a belt around his waist. Integrity will be like a belt around his hips. A wolf will reside with the lamb, and a leopard will lie down with a young goat. An ox and a young lion will graze together as a small child leads them along. Not only is this about the Christ, it's also about what we call the Messianic age, the age to come when Christ reigns on the earth. Now, after all this is over with, Psalm 11 and 12 are connected. Psalm 11 leads right into Psalm 12, and it's actually a part of the same passage. And Isaiah says, at that time you will say, I will praise you, O Lord, for even though you were angry with me, your anger subsided and you consoled me. Look, God is my deliverer. I will trust in him and not fear. For the Lord gives me strength and protects me. He has become my deliverer. Joyfully you will draw water from the springs of deliverance. At that time you will say, praise the Lord, ask him for help, publicize his mighty acts among the nations. Make it known that he is unique. Sing to the Lord, for he has done magnificent things. Let this be known throughout the earth. Cry out and shout for joy, O citizens of Zion, for the Holy One of Israel acts mightily among you. So, essentially, 12 is a response to 11. Isaiah chapter 53 starts in Isaiah 52, verse 13. There are all sorts of places in the Bible like this, so you need to make sure that your chapter isn't causing you to miss the connection between a passage, or when a passage was actually a part of one piece and got divided by the chapters which came later. Who would believe what we have just heard? Who would have believed what we just heard? What they just heard is Isaiah 52, starting at verse 13. Look, my servant will succeed. He'll be elevated, lifted high, greatly exalted. Just as many were horrified by the sight of you, he was disfigured. He no longer looked like a man. His form was so marred he no longer looked human. So now he will startle many nations. Kings will be shocked by his exaltation, for they will witness something unannounced to them, and they will understand something they had not heard about. Who would have believed what we just heard? As you can see, so again, it follows directly through, and 53 is a response to 52:13 onward. Now, on Monday, we will look at Isaiah 53 in an alternate passage when we look at the Septuagint, the Greek Old Testament. And we'll be looking at Isaiah 53:10 in the LXX, or the Septuagint, because there is a fundamental difference, and we will discuss that before the close of class on Monday. Okay. Now that we've got that, we'll move right along. Okay, now let's talk about David and Bathsheba. So a while ago I talked to y'all about honor and shame culture and how that runs the whole thing. It's different than American culture, which is innocent guilt. Innocent guilt. You either did it or you didn't. You're either innocent or you're guilty, and it's only on you, it's individual. Honor and shame culture can affect the honor and shame of your entire family. So when Jesus turned water into wine, his whole family was honored. But when Jesus is accused of being a false prophet, his whole family is shamed, and his brothers distance themselves from him. So keep that in mind. Honor and shame challenges, they must be public. And there are honor challenges, which Jesus encounters in Matthew 12 with the Pharisees. We'll look at that, time permitting. 2 Samuel 11. Okay. We'll read through this entire passage, and then we will go back over certain verses. In the spring of the year, at the time when kings normally conduct wars, David sent out Joab with his officers and the entire Israelite army. They defeated the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David stayed behind in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and walked around the roof of his palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. Now this woman was very attractive. So David sent someone to inquire about the woman. The messenger said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent some messengers to get her. She came to him, and he had sexual relations with her. Now, at that time, she was in the process of purifying herself from her menstrual uncleanliness. Then she returned to her home. The woman conceived and sent word to David, saying, "I'm pregnant." So David sent a message to Joab that said, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." So Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked about how Joab and the army were doing and how the campaign was going. Then David said to Uriah, "Go down to your home and relax." When Uriah left the palace, the king sent a gift to him. But Uriah stayed at the door of the palace with all the servants of his lord. He did not go down to his house. So they informed David, "Uriah has not gone down to his house." So David said to Uriah, "Haven't you just arrived from a journey? Why haven't you gone down to your house?" Uriah replied to David, "The ark and the Israel and Judah reside in temporary shelters, and my lord Joab and my lord's soldiers are camping in the open field. Should I go to my house to eat and drink and have marital relations with my wife? As surely as you are alive, I will not do this thing." So David said to Uriah, "Stay here another day. Tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem both that day and the following one. Then David summoned him. He ate and drank with him and got him drunk. But in the evening he went out to sleep on his bed with the servants of his Lord. He did not go down to his own house. In the morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it to with Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Station Uriah in the thick of the battle, and then withdraw from him so he will be cut down and killed." Just as Joab kept watch on the city, he stationed Uriah at the palace, at the place where he knew the best enemy soldiers were. When the men of the city came out and fought with Joab, some of David's soldiers fell in battle. Uriah the Hittite also died. Then Joab sent a full battle report to David. He instructed the messenger as follows: "When you finish giving the battle report to the king, if the king becomes angry and asks you, 'Why did you go so close to the city to fight? Didn't you realize they would shoot from the wall? Who struck down Abimelech, the son of Jerubbesheth? Didn't a woman throw an upper millstone down on him from the wall so that he died in Thebez? Why did you go so close to the wall?' Just say to him, 'Your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead.'" So the messenger departed. When he arrived, he informed David of all the news that Joab had sent with him. The messenger said to David, "The men overpowered us and attacked us in the field, but we forced them to retreat all the way to the door of the city gate. Then the archers shot at your servants from the wall, and some of the king's soldiers died. Your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead." David said to the messenger, "Oh, tell Joab, don't let this thing upset you. There is no way to anticipate whom the sword will cut down. Press the battle against the city and conquer it. Encourage him with these words." When Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah was dead, she mourned for him. When the time of mourning passed, David had her brought to his palace. She became his wife and she bore him a son. But what David had done upset the Lord. So the Lord sent Nathan to David. When he came to David, Nathan said, "There were two men in a certain city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had a great many flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except a little lamb that he had acquired. He raised it, and it grew up alongside him and his children. It used to eat his food, drink from his cup, and sleep in his arms. It was just like a daughter to him. When a traveler arrived at the rich man's home, he did not want to use one of his own sheep or cattle to feed the traveler who had come to visit him. Instead, he took the poor man's lamb and cooked it for the man who had come to visit him." Then David became very angry at this man. He said to Nathan, "As surely as the Lord lives, the man who did this deserves to die. Because he committed this cold-hearted crime, he must pay for the lamb 4 times over." Nathan said to David, "You are that man." And of course, the Lord launches into his punishment on David. The infant that Bathsheba has initially dies. Later, Bathsheba would give birth to King Solomon. But this initial infant does pass away. There are other apologetic reasons to discuss why this happens. The innocent is punished for the guilty. In a like way, the innocent Jesus suffered and died on behalf of sinners. Now, a couple things to look at when we talk about the cultural context of this event. So, in 11:1, in the spring of the year, at that time when kings normally conduct wars, David was sent out Joab with his officers and the entire Israelite army. Okay, David is at home. The text is already questioning David's honor by pointing out the fact he was not where he was supposed to be. Now, back in verse 2, we should understand that David is in a position of power. David does, in fact, take advantage of Bathsheba. There are some scholars who believe that this might have been a flirtation, or perhaps the misreading Scripture Western Eyes authors thinks that Bathsheba got what she wanted from the situation. I think that's a harsh read. There might have been a flirtation of sorts, But this has gone farther, it would seem, from Bathsheba mourning Uriah's death. This has gone farther than she ever thought it might. And David has taken it there. And he sent armed guards to her residence. Uriah and David were neighbors, and Uriah was very well known to the Israelites because of the proximity of his house to David's palace. So, verse 3, a couple different things. Remember honor and shame. At this time, you would not tell the king anything he did not know. So when David sent someone to inquire about the woman, the messenger said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?" The servant intentionally, the messenger intentionally phrases this as a question, so that then David can save face and keep his honor and say, "Oh yeah, yes it is." Because then that way it won't be that a messenger knew something the king did not. So, okay, messengers are sent. There's a textual note there. Now he had sexual relations with her. Now verse 4, this latter part of verse 4, then she returned to her home. The Hebrew is a lot harsher here. She was sent away. She was sent away. So, again, he's dishonored Bathsheba. Because if you want to honor a woman at that time, after something like this, you would allow her to stay at your home, or in this case, stay at the palace. You would not send her out into the night to go back home unless you intended to bring her shame, or you did not care about her shame. So it represents a lack of care on David's part. So David calls for Uriah in verse 7, send me Uriah the Hittite. A Israelite king never, ever, ever asked for particularly a foreigner who was on the battlefield to meet with him at the palace. When Uriah gets word that David wants to meet with him, he is fairly sure what it was about. This was something that happened on ancient Near Eastern battlefields. When the king sent for you, randomly as a soldier, particularly one as not a citizen, you can pretty much figure, oh, well, he slept with my wife and now he needs to pay the bride price. And that's essentially what David does. The king sent a gift to him in verse 8. The last part of verse 8, the king sent a gift to him. Now, here's the issue. Verse 9 says, but Uriah stayed at the door of the palace with all the servants of his lord. He did not go down to his house. Because if Uriah goes back to the house, that would mean he accepts the child as his. By this time, it is public knowledge that Bathsheba is pregnant because it's been sent by messengers. And messengers are under no non-disclosure agreement. Under no non-disclosure agreement. This was known by this time. And Uriah would be letting David off the hook if he goes home. So, now here's the issue. David sent the gift after Uriah to pay him for his troubles. The gift is too small. So Uriah stays where he is. And so in verse 10, so David said to Uriah, haven't you just arrived from a journey? Why haven't you gone down to your house? Verse 10 by David is a veiled threat. Not only would a king of Israel not meet with a Hittite soldier, who's not a mercenary, not a citizen, not only would they not do that, they certainly wouldn't do that twice. The second time is a veiled threat by David. Then Uriah says something to David. He loses his cool on David, as it were. And he loses it in verse 11. Uriah replied to David, the ark in Israel and Judah reside in temporary shelters, and my lord Joab and my lord's soldiers are camping in the open field. Should I go to my house to eat and drink and have marital relations with my wife? As surely as you are alive, I will not do this thing. Okay, now the marital relations with my wife thing is a strange thing to bring up to a king, but what it does is it clues us in that Uriah is fully aware of what is going on. So David says, stay here today and stay here another day. Tomorrow I will send you back. So, in other words, you essentially have 24 hours, 48 perhaps, because Uriah stayed in Jerusalem both that day and the following one. Then David makes one last attempt, and he gets Uriah drunk, but Uriah is not so drunk that he forgets that David has wronged him, and he forgets the argument. Remember, Uriah has shamed David in front of the servants. David's shame is up, his honor is down. So typically, when your honor is challenged and you lose an honor challenge, the only way to succeed is killing the person that took your honor. For this, see Matthew 12, verses 1 through 14. And come with questions Monday if we need to hear any of that again. We're going to move right along. Okay, so Uriah dies, he falls in battle. Then David says, don't let this thing upset you, verse 25. There is no way to anticipate whom the sword will cut down. So David feels no guilt about this situation. Now, that's very important. Ancient people did not have the same functioning conscience as a modern person. They operated on honor and shame. And it wasn't necessarily what pleased God, but it had to do with your honor and your shame as king and as a family member. So David has thought nothing about this. His honor is saved. Nothing about this has bothered David. It seems from the text in verse 25 that David quite likely blamed Uriah for the situation. And so the time of mourning even passes. Then the Lord sends Nathan the prophet to David. Now remember, Nathan had told him to build a house. Then the Lord said, no, you're not going to build me a house. I'll build you a house, David. But Nathan had said, go ahead and do it. The Lord is with you. But then the Lord clarifies, wait, no, I'm not. Don't build me a house. I'll build you a house. Your descendant will build the house. So David gave Nathan grace. In verse 7, I think we like to read verse 7 as, you are that man. No, I think in verse 7, when Nathan said to David, you are that man, he receives grace. I think it played more like, you are that man. Remember, the punishment for something like what David did is death. Not only had God predetermined that David's life would be spared, no one in Israel brought the charges upon the king. No one, not even Nathan. Nathan gives David the same grace that David gave to him. And we know David appreciated it because he named another son after Nathan the prophet, whom Jesus' ancestors are descended from. One parent is from Nathan, one parent is from Solomon. So that happens. David is not done with the consequences of his actions. If we look at 2 Samuel chapter 16, 21 and 22. Okay. Let's start up at verse 15. Now when Absalom and all the men of Israel arrived in Jerusalem, Ahithophel was with him. When David's friend Hushai the Archite came to Absalom, Hushai said to him, long live the king, long live the king. Absalom said to Hushai, do you call this loyalty to your friend? Why didn't you go with your friend? Hushai replied to Absalom, no, I will be loyal to the one whom the Lord, these people, and all the men of Israel have chosen. There's a lot of stuff wrong with that statement, particularly the fact that the Lord has still chosen David. He has not moved on to Absalom. Moreover, whom should I serve? Should it not be his son? Just as I served your father, so I will serve you. Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, give us your advice. What should we do? Ahithophel replied to Absalom, have sex with your father's concubines, whom he left to care for the palace. All Israel will hear that you have made yourself repulsive to your father. Then your followers will be motivated to support you. So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. Again, notice the public nature of this. And Absalom had sex with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. In those days, Ahithophel's advice was considered as valuable as a prophetic vision. Both David and Absalom highly regarded the advice of Ahithophel. Ahithophel is the grandfather of Bathsheba. So these are the revenge games for David. David is now facing the consequences of his actions, and it doesn't stop with there. Absalom is close to his sister Tamar. Tamar is living in Absalom's home as a recluse because their mutual half-brother Amnon has raped her and brought her permanent shame in this culture. So Absalom obviously is upset about this, and when you would have sex with the king's concubines, that was a vie for the throne. You were looking to get the throne. You are saying, you should not be king anymore, and it should be me. So that is a very, very important point to consider. Sorry, y'all, I lost the slides here. Okay, we back. Okay, the Solomon, king of Israel. Okay, now, Solomon has 700 wives, 300 concubines. He is wise, but he's flawed. And he uses forced labor to build the first temple. He is the first king of Israel to use slavery. And in Israel, you only were a slave for 7 years. Then you had the year of Jubilee. You're free. But Solomon doesn't do this. Solomon throws suffering at the temple until it is finished. Of course, Solomon also writes Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and the Song of Solomon, which in Hebrew, the Song of Songs. Please read 1 Kings 11 through 12 to 16 to get more of a treatment on Solomon. Okay. We're going to just a minute take a second to look at the Song of Solomon. I will not be able to give this as full of a treatment as I gave it in class, but I will show you all the color coding and kind of walk through the song and some very important points. So Solomon, of course, does finish the temple. And this is what it sort of looked like. In the inner sanctuary, which is the Holy of Holies, the door leading into it, all that. This is destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar and the fall of Jerusalem, which we will talk about before the close of class. So Solomon dies. He's used forced labor. The Israelites are angry about that, but now Rehoboam is trying to raise taxes. And so Rehoboam gets some very bad advice and says that I have more power in my little finger. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. It's another euphemism for their mutual private areas. They're not, ancient people are like this. And so the kingdom splits. That is the earthly reason. Spiritually, God rips away the kingdom from Solomon's house, and he keeps Judah, the southern kingdom, in honor of David, because he so loved David. So in Israel, from Jeroboam to Hoshea, there is nothing but bad kings. Check out 1 Kings 11 through 15, and some more parts in Chronicles. Chronicles 9 for Jeroboam, and for Pekah, chapter 28 of 2 Chronicles. Nothing but bad kings at all. Judah is more of a mix, and some of the famous people are righteous: Asa, Jehoshaphat, Hezekiah, of course, and Josiah. But as with anything, Zedekiah brings the downfall. Jehoiakim and Zedekiah essentially bring down the downfall of Judah. So Israel is destroyed by Assyria in 722 BC, Assyria being where Nineveh is located, where Jonah preached. Israel falls to Shalmaneser V and Sargon II. The exiled 10 tribes are lost to us. They're exiled out of the land, and this is what we refer to as the lost tribes of Israel. Idolatry, the worship of the gods, brought about its end. Judah is destroyed by Babylon in 597, and then again in 586, the temple is destroyed in 586 BC. We will discuss the second temple built by Herod on Monday. So they're conquered by the Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar II. King Zedekiah is taken captive during the first siege, but the temple and monarchy remain standing. In the second attack, though, the temple is destroyed and the elite are exiled to Babylon. So there was about a 10-year period there where the elite are still sort of in control of Judah. Nebuchadnezzar comes back and makes sure that is no longer the case. And this all stems from King Manasseh. Read 1 Kings 21. But yet, for the full story on King Manasseh, look at 2 Chronicles 33 to get the full picture. So we're going to talk about the exile here now.
In the year 587 BC, the city of Jerusalem was attacked by the Babylonian Empire. And a year later, the city and the temple were plundered and burned.
Thousands of Israelites were taken from their homes and relocated all over ancient Babylon. They became exiles.
And so now they're a minority, surrounded by a new culture with new gods.
Now, some Israelites chose to resist Babylon by revolting or withdrawing. Others gave in, adopting the Babylonian way of life and accepting these new gods as their own.
And you might think those are your only two options, but the prophet Jeremiah told them to do something totally different and surprising. To settle in, build houses, plant gardens, grow families, and most surprisingly, to seek the well-being of Babylon and pray to the Lord on its behalf.
So this is like a third way.
Yeah, it's not compromise or revolt.
What does it look like?
Well, there's a whole book of the Bible that explores that question. It's the story of Daniel.
Daniel was one of the Israelites taken into the Babylonian exile.
And because Daniel had a royal heritage and education, he was recruited along with some friends to work in the high court of Babylon.
Work for the enemy? That would be compromise. Or they could gain the king's trust, take him down from the inside.
That's what you might expect, but instead, they take Jeremiah's advice and choose the third way. They serve the king of Babylon, taking on Babylonian names and even clothing style.
So they seek Babylon's well-being. But in doing so, aren't they just giving up their heritage?
It could seem that way, but actually they aren't. As you read on, the story focuses on moments where they draw the line, and they choose faithfulness to their God and resist the influence of Babylon.
So, for example?
Well, like when they're commanded to bow down to the idol of Babylon and give allegiance to the king as if he's a god.
They won't go that far.
Right. This is where you see their true loyalty. It requires them to critique Babylon's idolatry of power, its arrogance, its injustice, but they do it non-violently by laying down their lives. And so God vindicates Daniel and his friends for their faithfulness.
So they would serve Babylon, seek its well-being, but their loyalty was always to God.
Yeah, this is what Jeremiah was envisioning. The way of the exile is a combination of loyalty and also subversion.
So they're still exiles, but don't Daniel and his friends long to go home?
Yes. In fact, Daniel believed that God was going to send a ruler to bring down Babylon and create a true kingdom of peace.
When did he think this ruler would come?
Well, at first he thought within his lifetime, but then he had a dream where he found out that after Babylon would come another oppressive empire, then another, then another.
And so Babylon did fall, and Israel did get to go back home, but now they're ruled by Babylon's successors.
And so they maintained the mindset of an exile, waiting for their true home to come to them. And they continued the same practice of loyalty and subversion to any new versions of Babylon that came along. And this leads us to the time of Jesus.
The empire of his day was Rome, ruled by Caesar. Now, some Israelites wanted to resist, while others gave in and adopted Roman culture and its gods.
But watch Jesus carry on the subversive loyalty of Daniel. Like when he said, it's fine to pay taxes to Caesar, give him back his coins. But then he said, don't mistake Caesar for God. God's the one who deserves your total life and allegiance.
So the way of Jesus is this same mix of loyalty and subversion.
Yeah, like he taught his followers to love and even bless their enemies. But he also got arrested for speaking out against the corrupt leaders of Jerusalem and Rome. He critiqued their idolatry of power, and it cost him his life. But God vindicated him by raising him from the dead as the true king of the nations.
The king that Daniel had hoped for.
Right. And Jesus promised that one day his kingdom would prevail.
And so until then, his followers are living in a type of exile.
Yeah, this is why the Apostle Peter calls followers of Jesus foreigners and exiles. He told them to respect the authorities of whatever place you happen to live, to honor and love all people, but then he reminds them that this isn't their true home. They're still living in Babylon.
But, well, they're not living in Babylon. Babylon doesn't exist anymore.
Or does it? In the Bible, Babylon has become a symbol that describes any human institution that demands allegiance to its idolatrous redefinitions of good and evil.
Okay, so we all live and work in Babylon. How do I seek the well-being of Babylon while my allegiance is to someone greater?
Yes, Jesus' followers are called to live in that tension between loyalty and subversion. That's the way of the exile.
Okay. So, just wanted to make sure that we all had a picture of what the exile kind of meant in the story of Israel. They are told that they can return by the Persians. We'll get to that in just a second. Please make sure to read in your time Jeremiah 29, 5 through 7. Okay, so some key characters in the exile. You got Cyrus the Great, the Persian king who authorized the return. And then you got Sheshbazzar, the initial leader of the first returning group, and he laid the temple foundation. He laid the temple foundation. He did not finish the rebuilding. Zerubbabel was the governor of Judah, and he led the first wave of returnees and oversaw temple reconstruction. So he oversaw temple reconstruction. He, on both sides, is an ancestor of Jesus. Ezra was the priest and scribe, and he led the later return and focused on religious reforms. Ezra is the Old Testament editor. When you see a note in the Psalms that says things like the Psalms of David and Solomon are ended, you can thank Ezra for that note. I believe that's Psalm 73. Nehemiah, cupbearer to the Persian king, and he oversaw rebuilding of Jerusalem's walls and civil organizations. So these are some of your key characters who you may write about in your papers. So let's look at this in summary, and then we're going to, for our last remaining time, jump into the Song of Solomon.
The books of 1st and 2nd Chronicles. While they're two separate books in our Bibles, that division is not original. Due to scroll length, the book was divided in two, but it was written as one book with one coherent storyline. Now, in our English Bibles, Chronicles comes after the books of Samuel and Kings, and most of Chronicles is actually repeat content from those books. And so most modern readers, when they come to Chronicles, they think, wait a minute, I just read all of this, and so they skip it. And that's a shame, because this book is really unique and important in the Bible. In the traditional Jewish ordering of the Bible, Chronicles is actually the last book because it summarizes all of the Jewish scriptures. The first word in the book is Adam, the first character at the beginning of the story, and then the last paragraph announces the return of Israel from exile. Now, we don't know who wrote this book, but we can tell from details within it, it was produced by somebody who lived a couple hundred years after the Israelites returned from the Babylonian exile. Now, for this author, Jerusalem and the temple were rebuilt some time ago, and as we learned from Ezra and Nehemiah, things were not going well. The great prophetic hope was that the city and the temple would be rebuilt, that God would come to live among his people, the Messianic king would come, and all the nations would come live under his peaceful rule, and none of that has happened. And so the author of Chronicles has reshaped these stories of David and Solomon and the kings of the past in order to provide a message of hope for the future. And we'll see that he's designed this book to emphasize two clear themes. First, the hope of the coming Messianic king, and second, the hope for a new temple. Let's just dive in and you'll see these themes all over the book. First Chronicles begins with 9 chapters of genealogies, long lists of names. And you'll read these and think that this is kind of boring, and that may be true for you, but actually they're very, very important. The author is summarizing here the whole storyline of the Old Testament by naming all of the key characters in the stories. And as he does so, he shapes the genealogies to emphasize 2 key lineages. First is the line of the promised Messianic king. So lots of space is dedicated to tracing the line of Judah that led all the way to King David, to whom the Messianic promise was given. And then from David, the author traces that line up into his own day. The other family line that receives lots of attention here is that of the priesthood, the descendants of Aaron, who, of course, served in the temple. And so right from the start, you can see the 2 main themes, the author's hope of the Messiah coming to build a new temple, and it's rooted in these ancient genealogies. Now, after that, the author moves into the stories about David, and most of these are going to be familiar to you from the book of Samuel, but again, there's some really important differences. So first of all, the author leaves out all of the negative stories about David, where he's portrayed as weak or immoral. So Saul chasing David around the desert and persecuting him, the story of David's adultery with Bathsheba and then murdering her husband, all of that is gone. And what's left are the stories that portray David as a good guy. And not only that, there's also new additional material that you won't find in the book of Samuel that shows David in a very positive light. So there's a large block of chapters where David makes preparations for the temple. He arranges resources and builders and Levites and choirs. And not only that, the author also portrays David as a Moses-like figure. God gives David plans for building the temple just as he gave plans to Moses for building the tabernacle. So why all this new material about David? The author's not trying to hide David's flaws. He knows that anybody can go read about them in the book of Samuel. Rather, he's trying to portray David as the ideal king in order to make him an image or a type of the future Messiah from the line of David. It's very similar to how Jeremiah or Ezekiel spoke of the coming Messiah as a new David. This is most clear in how the author retells the story of God's covenant promise to David in 1 Chronicles 17. When you compare this story with its parallel in 2 Samuel 7, you'll see that the author of Chronicles is highlighting that neither David, nor Solomon, nor any of the kings from his line were the Messianic king, and that when the Messiah does come, he will be a king like David. And so for this author, these stories about David from the past are what sustain his hope for the future. After David dies, we move into 2 Chronicles, which focuses on the kings that lived in Jerusalem. And again, there's lots of overlap with 1st and 2nd Kings, but there are many key differences. So the author has left out all of the stories about the kings of northern Israel, so he can just focus on the line of David. And there's lots of new material about these kings from David's line. He highlights the kings that were obedient to God, and he adds new stories about how their obedience led to success and God's blessing. But he also adds new stories about kings who were unfaithful to God. They didn't follow the Torah, they led Israel to worship idols, and these kings face horrible consequences, all leading up to Israel's exile, a mess of their own making. And so this whole section becomes a series of character studies where the author wants later generations of Israelites to learn from their family history, and so become faithful to their God and the Torah. Now, the book's conclusion is really unique, too. At the very end of the book, the king of the Persians, his name's Cyrus, and he tells the Israelites that they can go back home, return from exile, rebuild the city and the temple. And he says, last line of the book, "Whoever there is among you, of all his people, may the Lord his God be with him, and let him go up." And that's how the book ends, with an incomplete sentence. Now, of course, the author knows about the first return from exile and the stories of Ezra and Nehemiah, but clearly in his view, the prophetic hopes of Israel were not fulfilled in those events. And so this incomplete ending shows that the author's hope is set on yet another return from exile, when the Messiah will finally come to rebuild the temple and restore God's people. And so the book of Chronicles, it's the final book of the Jewish scriptures. It ends by pointing forward. It calls God's people to look back in order to look ahead, because the past has become the source of hope for the future. So Chronicles concludes the Old Testament as a story in search of an ending, and that's what this book is all about.
Okay, and we thank Dr. Tim Mackey for that. So I do want to point out, as a cultural note, please, in your spare time, this is not probably going to be on the test, but Cyrus the Great, again, Persian king, Cyrus is known in the secular world as a leader on religious tolerance. A leader on religious tolerance. So his actions to send the people back from exile to go rebuild their temple is not a surprise, according to the records that we have of him otherwise. Okay, so we're going to look at the Song of Songs. I will not give it the same treatment that I gave it on Thursday night. It will be the same content, but this time what I'm going to do is just give you all another play-by-play and point out some things that you may want to hear again, and I will show you Song of Solomon color-coded so that, and I will call it out so that you all have that. Okay, so again, we're going to be looking at it from the three-character view. Obviously, you have the Jewish tradition, which is an allegory for Israel and God, the Christian tradition, which is an allegory for Christ and the church, and of course, perhaps to some people it's just a collection of ancient poetry. And then there's this fourth view, really the third and fourth. It's not as popular as the first two, but still very popular. The love triangle, or the shepherd view, which is a three-character model. So there is not just Solomon and his bride, but the third character being the shepherd. So again, Solomon has 700 wives and 300 concubines, girlfriends, when it's all over. But for the couple in the Song of Solomon, they're the only ones in the world for each other. So this has led to some questions about who exactly is being described. For the purposes of this class, we were looking at the shepherd hypothesis, or the three-character view. So while doing that, let me Okay, everyone. So the Song of Songs, the Solomon's most excellent love song, verse 1. So again, verse 2 through 4 will be in the mouth of the Shulamite, the woman. Verse 4, the net has translated this, may the king bring me into his bedroom chambers. I have opted for another translation, the king has brought me into his chambers. And then, of course, you have the maidens of Jerusalem later in verse 4 saying, we will rejoice and delight in you. We will praise your love more than wine. So the lover in verse 2 through 4 at first is remembering her lover. And then she says to her lover, how rightly the young women adore you. And most of you in Song of Solomon 1:5 have, I am black, or I am dark but lovely, or but comely. Finally, there has been an update to the translation here in the New American Standard Bible, 2020 edition. And now the Shulamite has been translated as saying, I am black and beautiful, dark like the tents of Kedar, lovely like the tents curtains of Salma. Do not stare at me because I am dark, for the sun has burned my skin. My brothers were angry with me. They made me the keeper of the vineyards. Alas, my own vineyard I could not keep. So she's running around trying to do everything for everybody else. And her brothers, they put all the work off on her. And she has to defend her appearance to the Israelite women. And then she says, tell me, O you whom my heart loves, where do you pasture your sheep? Where do you rest your sheep during the midday heat? Tell me, lest I wander around beside the flocks of your companions. And she remembers her lover, the shepherd, responding, if you do not know, O most beautiful among women, simply follow the tracks of my flock and pasture your little lambs beside the tents of the shepherds. And then Solomon enters in verse 9 through 11, saying, oh, my beloved, you are like a mare among Pharaoh's stallions. Your cheeks are beautiful with ornaments. Your neck is lovely with string jewels. We will make for you gold ornaments studded with silver. And in verse 12, the woman is sitting, the Shulamite woman is sitting at the table with King Solomon, but her mind is not on him. She says, while the king was at his banqueting table, my nard gave forth its fragrance. My beloved is like a fragrant pouch of myrrh, spending the night between my breasts. My beloved is like a cluster of henna blossoms in the vineyards of En-gedi. So she's fantasizing about her beloved while in Solomon's presence. And in her mind, she remembers how he used to speak to her. Oh, how beautiful you are, my beloved. Oh, how beautiful you are. Your eyes are like doves. And then she remembers how she would respond. Oh, how handsome you are, my lover. Oh, how delightful you are. The lush foliage is our canopy bed. The cedars are the beams of our bedroom chamber. The pines are the rafters of our bedroom. From that time, take a look at this one more time. That's chapter 1. Chapter 1, 16 and 17 is the Shulamite woman, colored in pink. The shepherd is green, so verse 1:8 is also the shepherd, as is verse 15 of chapter 1. And King Solomon is blue for the house of David. 9 through 11 is in the month of Solomon. The same sort of thing is going on in verse 10 through 13, in that it's the shepherd. She's remembering again how her lover spoke to her. I'm sorry, y'all. Chapter 2. Pardon me. Verse chapter 2. I am a meadow flower of Sharon, a lily from the valleys, is what she responds to what she is saying to Solomon. And then Solomon responds in verse 2 of chapter 2, colored in blue, like a lily among the thorns, so is my darling among the maidens. In verse 3, she responds, like an apple tree among the trees of the forest, so is my beloved among the young women. I delight to sit in his shade, and his fruit is sweet to my taste. So she's not actually responding to Solomon. She's going on her own thing. He brought me into his banquet hall, she continues in verse 4, and he looked at me lovingly. Verse 5, sustain me with raisin cakes, refresh me with apples, for I am faint of love, I'm lovesick. So again, notice there's no response, and she continues to reminisce about her beloved. Okay. All the way to the Shulamite stops talking in verse 9, and the lover again picks up in verse 10 rather. Arise, my darling, my beautiful one, come away with me. And then he describes the springtime. And then when he finishes talking in verse 13, she responds to him, oh, my dove, in the clefts of the rock, verse 14, in the hiding place of the mountain crags, let me see your face. Let me hear your voice. Your voice is sweet and your face is lovely. Of course, she's dreaming of this. And verse 15 belongs in the mouth of Solomon. Solomon advances and is rejected. And he says to her, catch the foxes for us, and the little foxes that ruin the vineyards, for our vineyard is in bloom. The Shulamite responds in verse 16, my lover is mine, and I am his. He grazes among the lilies. Until the dawn arise, verse 17, and the shadows flee. Turn, my beloved, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the mountain gorges or on the mountains of Bether, is what most of you will have. Song of Solomon 13. She's talking that entire one until you get to verse 6. Solomon again tries to woo her, and he continues trying until all the way till chapter 4 and verse 15. It does not work. And as he finishes speaking to her, she says, awake, O north wind, come, O south wind, blow on my garden so that fragrant spices may send out their sweet smell. May my beloved come into his garden and eat its delightful fruit. Again, she has not responded to Solomon. She is on her own time, dreaming about the beloved. In this version of the story, she is essentially captured or taken away to King Solomon's palace. Most girls, they don't dream of their beloved being a shepherd if he's a king. They dream of marrying the prince or the king, all right? So that's another clue that we have. She's thinking about him, and this is not a story of Solomon and his true love. Chapter 5, she imagines him saying, I have entered my garden, O my sister, my bride. I gathered my myrrh with balsam spice. I have eaten my honeycomb and my honey. I have drunk my milk, my wine and milk. Eat, friends, and drink. Drink freely, O lovers. Throughout this whole sort of thing, you'll see the characters talk to each other and refer to them as my sister, my bride, or that you are my brother. Men and women at this time did not speak in public unless they were siblings. And the Shulamite clues us into that and later on in the song. So the Shulamite responds and tells us of a dream she had in chapter 5 and verse 2. I was asleep, but my mind was dreaming. Listen, my lover is knocking at the door. And she dreams that he says, open for me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with dampness of the night. And she says, I have already taken off my robe, and must I put it on again? I have already washed my feet, must I soil them again? My lover thrust his hand through the hole, and my feelings were stirred for him. I arose to open for my beloved. My hands dripped with myrrh, my fingers flowed with myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my beloved, but my lover had already turned and gone away. I fell into deep despair when he departed. I looked for him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer me. The watchmen found me as they made their rounds in the city. They beat me, they bruised me. They took away my cloak, those watchmen on the walls. I admonish you, O maidens of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, what will you tell him? Tell him that I am lovesick. And the women in Jerusalem, in verse 9, respond, why is your beloved better than the others? O most beautiful of women, why is your beloved better than others, that you would admonish us in this manner? So, in other words, your man ain't, we don't want your man, girl. But what is it about him? And so from verse 10 all the way to verse 16, she tells them how beautiful and how lovely she thinks her beloved is. And same thing for 15, or for 6 rather. They respond with a joke. Where is your beloved gone, O most beautiful among women? Where is your beloved turned? Tell us that we may seek him with you. Of course, they're not going to actually help her look. It's a joke. But she responds seriously, and she says, my beloved has gone down to his garden, to the flower beds of balsam spices, to graze in the gardens and to gather lilies. I am my lover's, and my lover is mine. He grazes among the lilies. So she rejects Solomon again when Solomon makes another attempt, when he describes her beauty again from verses 6:4 all the way to 10. And of course, the Shulamite again in verse 11 of chapter 6, she has a flashback, possibly to being taken by Solomon, but she does not actually respond to Solomon. She's like, no, I went down to the orchard of walnut trees to look for the blossoms of the valley, to see if the vines had budded or if the pomegranates were in bloom. That's it. And so Solomon responds, turn, turn, O perfect one, turn, turn, that I may stare at you. Another translation would say, come back, O Shulamite, come back, that we may gaze at you. And then he says, why do you gaze upon the perfect one, or the Shulamite, like the dances of Manaheim? That was a military excursion. If you notice, everything that Solomon brings up is physical. You can see it again in chapter 7. Solomon speaks for the whole time until you get to chapter 8. And she rejects him again in 7:10. I am my beloved's, and his desire, and he desires me. Or his desire is for me. And then in verse 11, she makes her escape. Come, my beloved, let us go to the countryside. Let us spend the night in the villages. Let us rise early to go to the vineyards, to see if the vines have budded, to see if the blossoms have opened, if the pomegranates are in bloom. There I will give you my love. The mandrakes send out their fragrance out over our doors, every delicacy, both new and old, which I have stored up for you, my lover. So I do want to point out too, mandrakes in the ancient world were an aphrodisiac, acting something like Viagra or any other aphrodisiac today, which remember that when you read about Leah and Rachel having a fight over Jacob and mandrakes in Genesis. Okay. Again, she calls for her beloved once again. Again, there it is, the admonition again, I admonish you, O maidens of Jerusalem, do not arouse or awaken love until it pleases. In verse 5 of chapter 8, the women make another appearance and says, who is this coming up from the wilderness, leaning on her beloved? So they recognize that it is not Solomon. The man speaks to her, the shepherd speaks to her, and says, under the apple tree I aroused you. There your mother conceived you. There she bore you, was in labor of childbirth. There she who bore you was in labor of childbirth. And then the Shulamite responds in 8:6, set me like a cylinder seal over your heart, like a signet over your arm. For love is as strong as death. Passion is as unrelenting as Sheol. Its flames burst forth. It is a blazing flame. Surging waters cannot quench love. Flood waters cannot overflow it. If someone were to offer all his possessions to buy love, the offer would be utterly despised. And then her brothers respond, we have a sister. We have a little sister. And as yet she has no breast. What shall we do for our sister on the day she is spoken for? Well, if she is a wall, we will build on her a battlement of silver. But she is a door. We will barricade her with boards of cedar. And Ned has this translated as I was a wall. I've gone with the other translation, I am a wall. By asking if she's a wall, the brothers are asking her if Solomon has had his way with her or if she is still a virgin. But she responds, I'm a wall, I'm a wall. And I found favor in his eyes. And so the brothers said, oh, okay. He didn't take advantage of you. We can party. So they go off and they get married. And finally, after she returns and makes her escape, the shepherd says, on O you who stay in the gardens, my companions are listening attentively for your voice. Let me be the one to hear it. And she tells them, make haste, my beloved. Be like a young gazelle or a young stag on the mountains of spices. It has an abrupt end, and it's because love such as between the shepherd and the Shulamite never ends. They are the only ones in the world for each other. Let me point out a little bit on verse 8 and 12, verse 11 and 12 of chapter 8. Solomon had a vineyard at Baal Haman, she says. He leased out the vineyard to those who maintained it. Each was to bring 1,000 shekels of silver for its fruit. My vineyard, which belongs to me, is at my disposal alone. 1,000 shekels belong to you, O Solomon, and 200 shekels belong to those who maintain it for its fruit. So in other words, Solomon can keep his wealth, his vineyards, his servants, and his fruits. I am not for sale, and he can sleep with all the women he wants to. My vineyard belongs to me. Euphemism for her private areas as well. So the Bible is kind of a mature book, but this is not the same treatment I gave it Thursday night. This is a shorter version, so you can see how the three-character hypothesis works when trying to understand this psalm. Okay. Now that part is understood, let us talk about Monday. We are going to look at first and primarily the time between the testaments on Monday. We will spend some time on that. But also, very important that we sit through this before you